It's just kind of who I am. I want to pour into my team as much as possible, and I'm pretty in tune with my body. I can read a room pretty well, and so when I see we're lacking a little bit, you got to step up. But if we're good, you're just there to encourage and give people confidence.
Nobody expected the biggest controversy of the entire basketball season to come from the very people who were trusted to protect the future of the sport. When Caitlin Clark first arrived in Indiana, she wasn't just drafted to play basketball. She was carrying the massive financial weight of an entire league on her shoulders, bringing sold-out arenas, unprecedented multi-million-dollar television deals, and a tidal wave of new, eager fans who had never watched a single game before in their lives. You would naturally think that the Indiana Fever front office would immediately roll out the red carpet, build an absolute fortress around their new golden goose, and do everything in their immense power to ensure her transition into the professional ranks was completely seamless. Instead, what actually unfolded over the next few terrifying months looked a lot less like a welcome party, and a whole lot more like a calculated slow-motion sabotage that left the entire sports world completely speechless. Fans immediately noticed that something was seriously wrong with how the team's leadership, specifically at the highest executive levels, was managing their brand-new superstar. Bizarre coaching decisions that made zero tactical sense, public statements that felt strangely dismissive and cold, and an absolute refusal to stand up for her when opposing players took brutal, unprovoked cheap shots, all pointed directly to a massive, toxic disconnect behind the scenes. The whispers started small, circulating quietly on social media and late-night sports forums, to suggesting that the veteran executives were actively trying to humble the rookie rather than empower her. But those quiet whispers quickly turned into a deafening roar when an unexpected, fearless voice from a rival team decided she had finally seen enough and chose to rip the lid off the entire shady operation. It ultimately took a fiercely competitive opponent to expose the deep-rooted rot happening inside Indiana's own house, and what she boldly revealed sent massive shockwaves through the entire sports landscape. But to truly understand the sheer magnitude of this bizarre betrayal, you have to look closely at the undeniable pattern of disrespect that started the very moment draft night ended. The initial signs of internal friction were glaringly obvious from the very first tip-off of the season, leaving audiences scratching their heads in pure confusion. While the mainstream media was busy crowning the new queen of the court and celebrating the insane television ratings, the Indiana Fever's coaching staff and upper management seemed totally determined to treat her like a massive problem they were forced to deal with, rather than a generational franchise-altering talent. Loyal fans watched in absolute disbelief as head coach Christy Sides continuously made baffling rotational choices, repeatedly pulling her star player during critical offensive runs and implementing slow, grinding schemes that completely neutralized the fast-paced, deep-shooting style that made Clark famous in the very first place. It wasn't just standard rookie growing pains, it looked highly intentional, almost as if the playbook was designed to make her struggle. Every single time the rookie started to catch fire and the crowd got on their feet, a sudden timeout was inexplicably called, or a bizarre substitution was made that killed the offensive momentum dead in its tracks. The offense was constantly run through veteran players who simply couldn't match the rookie's pace, forcing the greatest college point guard in history to stand in the corner like a glorified decoy. When reporters asked the coaching staff about these highly questionable tactics, the answers were always dismissive, filled with condescending remarks about how she needed to learn the professional game and earn her stripes. It felt less like a basketball strategy and way more like an aggressive hazing ritual endorsed by the very top of the organization. But the tactical mismanagement on the offensive end of the floor was only the very tip of the iceberg in this unfolding drama. The real, undeniable outrage ignited when the horrific physical targeting began on the court. Opposing players were practically hunting her during games, delivering brutal blindside hits, throwing dangerous elbows, and engaging in excessively hard fouls that went way beyond standard physical basketball play. In literally any other professional sports league in the world, on any other team, the front office would immediately be on the phone with the commissioner demanding protection, and the head coach would willingly take a technical foul or even get ejected just to prove a point to the referees. Think about how the NBA protected Michael Jordan, or how NHL teams always employ enforcers to keep their star players safe from cheap shots. Instead, the Indiana Brass remained absolutely, terrifyingly dead silent. They allowed their franchise centerpiece to be bullied, battered, and bruised on a nightly basis, offering only weak, politically correct statements to the press after the games. They didn't sign a tough veteran enforcer in the off-season. They didn't alter their lineups to provide her with any physical cover. It became painfully clear to everyone watching that the veteran executives in the front office, heavily influenced by the stubborn old guard of the league, were perfectly fine with watching the rookie get physically dismantled on national television. They desperately wanted her to learn her place in the pecking order, even if it meant risking the long-term health and safety of the exact player who was quite literally paying all of their salaries through unprecedented ticket sales. As the dark bruises added up and the frustrating losses piled on early in the season, the millions of new fans suddenly realized this wasn't just mere incompetence from a bad coaching staff. It was a highly organized effort, from the top down, to break her spirit. But this silent, malicious campaign of humility was about to hit a massive, unexpected roadblock that nobody in the front office saw coming. Enter Sophie Cunningham, a player who instantly flipped the entire narrative upside down. If there is one specific player in the league who absolutely doesn't care about playing the polite corporate PR game, it's the Phoenix Mercury veteran. He's known across the sport for her fiery demeanor, relentless trash talk on the court, and absolute refusal to back down from absolutely anyone. Cunningham has successfully built a solid reputation as a player who tells it exactly how it is, regardless of whose feelings get hurt. While the rest of the entire league was busy giving highly rehearsed, carefully curated answers about the new rookie class and tiptoeing around the undeniable, toxic jealousy festering in locker rooms, Sophie took a completely different, explosive route. She looked around at the newly sold-out crowds, the luxury chartered flights that the players had begged for over a decade, and the unprecedented mainstream media coverage, and she recognized exactly who was personally responsible for all of it. More importantly, she saw right through the fake, the forced smiles of the veteran executives who were privately seething that a young rookie was getting all the credit they felt they deserved. Cunningham has never been one to mince her words, and during various highly publicized media appearances and candid podcast interviews, she started dropping massive, undeniable hints about the toxic gatekeeping that was severely infecting the league's leadership. She boldly pointed out that veteran players and front office managers desperately needed to swallow their massive pride and appreciate the reality of the new financial situation, rather than actively trying to tear down the brand new face of the sport. She stated blatantly that everybody's paychecks, visibility, and brand deals were skyrocketing entirely because of the new attention, and that the sheer bitterness she was witnessing was not only pathetic, but incredibly bad for business. While she didn't name specific executives right out of the gate, anyone paying close attention knew exactly who she was targeting. She was watching the exact same game tape as the furious fans. She saw the glaring lack of a physical enforcer in Indiana. She saw the head-scratching, backhanded quotes from the Fever president and front office staff, who seemed way more concerned with protecting the fragile feelings of league veterans than building a winning, dominant culture around their own prodigy. Sophie's unapologetic, blunt stance struck a massive nerve across the sports world because it finally validated everything the fans had been screaming at their televisions for months. She shattered the illusion that the WNBA was a perfectly unified sisterhood, exposing the harsh reality that deeply rooted jealousy was actively dictating front office decisions. But dropping heavy hints on podcasts was only the very beginning of the storm. The real, catastrophic explosion happened when the unspoken rules of the exclusive executive club were finally dragged kicking and screaming into the light of day. The immense tension reached an absolute boiling point when the grim behind-the-scenes reality of the Indiana front office started leaking heavily into the public domain. Rumors began to rapidly circulate that the Fever president and her top executives were suddenly facing immense internal pressure, not just from the millions of angry fans, but from the terrifying realization that their old-school, stubborn methods were actively damaging a newly minted billion-dollar brand. Cunningham's blunt commentary acted as the perfect catalyst, emboldening brave insiders and team staffers to start whispering to reporters about the true, ugly nature of the team's internal politics. It was brutally exposed that management was allegedly prioritizing the fragile egos of veteran players and longtime league officials over the actual success and safety of their star rookie. Shocking reports surfaced suggesting that the front office was perfectly content with the head coach's bizarre, momentum-killing strategies because it perfectly aligned with their outdated philosophy of making the rookie earn it the hard way, regardless of the massive cost to the team's win-loss record. The sheer arrogance and blatant disrespect of this approach sent the newly energized fan base into an absolute frenzy of rage. People were absolutely furious, and rightfully so. They had spent their hard-earned money on expensive season tickets, thousands of jerseys, and cross-country travel, only to quickly realize the team's own president was seemingly endorsing a highly hostile work environment for the very player they all came to see. The internet detectives immediately went to work, pulling old, deleted quotes, intensely analyzing body language during post-game press conferences, and highlighting the glaring, unacceptable lack of public support from the top brass whenever controversy struck. Every single time a brutal, cheap shot went totally unpunished on the court. Every time a terrible, isolation-heavy play was drawn up in the final crucial seconds of a close game. The fans pointed their fingers directly at the executive suite. Sophie's absolute refusal to play along with the league's forced, toxic positivity exposed the glaring hypocrisy of the entire situation. She made it completely acceptable for fans and media members to finally say the quiet part out loud. The people currently running the show were the exact ones holding the entire sport back from reaching its true potential. They were so deeply obsessed with maintaining the old hierarchy that they were willing to sabotage their own franchise's future. And the rapidly mounting pressure from this massive public exposure was about to cause a monumental, unprecedented collapse at the absolute highest levels of the Indiana organization. So you simply cannot run a targeted sabotage campaign in the modern, hyper-connected era of sports and expect to survive the relentless wrath of the internet, especially when a highly respected rival player is actively calling out your DMN nonsense on a national stage. The walls were rapidly closing in on the Indiana front office, and the carefully crafted narrative they had tried so desperately to control was now completely out of their trembling hands. Suddenly, breaking news hit the timeline that sent an absolute shockwave through the entire basketball community. The Fever president abruptly announced she was stepping away from her highly coveted role at the end of the season. The organization frantically tried to spin the shocking departure with the usual watered-down corporate jargon. her releasing vague statements about seeking new professional opportunities and smoothly transitioning into different advisory roles. But absolutely nobody was buying that fake narrative for a single second. The timing was entirely too perfect, and the writing had been on the wall ever since the furious fan outrage reached an absolute fever pitch midway through the season. This wasn't a peaceful, planned retirement. This was a forced, embarrassing exit, orchestrated by the undeniable reality that the current leadership was completely unequipped and unwilling to handle a modern global superstar. The brutal exposure of their archaic methods, heavily amplified by the relentless daily scrutiny of the fans and the blunt, undeniable honesty of players like Cunningham, made their lucrative positions entirely untenable. And they had foolishly gambled on the ridiculous idea that they could humble the most popular athlete in the entire sport and successfully maintain their iron grip on the team's culture, and they lost spectacularly. The fan base celebrated the massive departure as a historic victory, viewing it as the highly necessary first step in cleansing the entire organization of the toxic jealousy that had plagued the rookie's highly anticipated debut season. But while the head of the snake had finally been removed, the immense damage left behind raised serious, lingering questions about the rest of the coaching staff and the deep-rooted issues that still desperately needed to be addressed before the next season tipped off. And the historic executive shakeup proved once and for all that relentless fan pressure and widespread media exposure could actually force real, tangible change in a league that historically ignored outside criticism. But the brutal war for the very soul of the franchise was far from over. This entire dramatic saga is about so much more than just a few missed foul calls, a poorly drawn-up offensive play, or a single bitter executive. It is the ultimate defining case study of a massive generational culture clash. For over 2 long decades, the WNBA operated in a very specific, highly insular way. It was a daily grind, a constant struggle for basic mainstream recognition, and the tough veterans who built the league from the ground up understandably felt a fierce, protective sense of ownership over the league's identity and culture. But when a brand new era suddenly arrives out of nowhere, bringing private chartered planes, massive global endorsements, and literally millions of new eyeballs to every single game, the stubborn old guard faced a highly critical choice: adapt to the blinding spotlight or fight desperately to protect the old ways. The Indiana front office foolishly chose to fight, aggressively attempting to shoehorn a revolutionary, boundary-pushing talent into a highly restrictive, outdated box. By doing so, they completely alienated the new lifeblood of the sport and sparked a massive fan rebellion. Sophie Cunningham's heavy involvement in this crazy narrative was so incredibly crucial because she perfectly represents the bridge between the gritty toughness of the old league and the spectacular, highly lucrative reality of the new one. She publicly proved that you can be a fierce, uncompromising competitor without ever resorting to petty sabotage, bitter resentment, or toxic jealousy. You can desperately want to destroy your opponent on the court while still deeply respecting the massive financial and cultural shift they bring to your own bank account. The very public exposure of the fever, President's failure to grasp this basic fundamental concept, serves as a massive, glaring warning sign to every single other executive, general manager, and head coach in the entire league. The dark days of operating in the quiet shadows, where petty politics and fragile veteran egos dictate the flow of the game, and the treatment of young players, are officially dead and buried. The high-definition cameras are always rolling. The internet sleuths are meticulously tracking every single substitution and press conference quote. And modern players are no longer afraid to grab a live microphone and publicly call out the massive bullshit when they see it happening right in front of them. The old, broken system has been violently dragged kicking and screaming into the modern era of sports media. And those who stubbornly refuse to get on board will simply be fired and left behind in the dust.